think the challenge is still at the end of the day, like you can have AI generate all of this, great research for you. You can have you still have to then go through and actually being able to pull, use AI, I think, to actually plug in your expertise into those different areas. It's actually kind of hard to keep customers really happy, keep them engaged, keep them up to date on how the product's changing, and now have AI startups and all of these new companies that are spinning up and solving, in some cases, point solutions. They're doing it really aspirational. I think that can just be challenging in the way that people expect personalization now, and the way that a lot of people are finding products through LLMs.
There's a shift happening in B2B marketing. Product marketers are no longer just launch support. They're being asked to drive retention, conversion, pricing, even revenue strategy. But many teams still treat product marketing managers as reactive, not revenue critical. Today, I want to understand what happens when product marketing steps up. And for that, today we have Alex. He leads product marketing for Sales Hub at HubSpot, one of my favorite companies, and has deep experience launching go-to-market plays, repositioning products, and working with both product-led growth and sales-led models. He's someone who's been in the thick of it, small teams with big outcomes. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey, Alex, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I know you've been in product marketing for almost a decade now, and I have a lot of questions for you.
A decade makes me sound really old, but then I do the math in my head. I mean, product marketing plus other marketing, I feel tangentially. But yes, a decade, that sounds old, but I'm here for it.
So I'll ask you this question right off the bat. You've been in product marketing for a couple of years now. What do you think has changed a lot?
Yeah, I feel the most obvious cop-out answer is going to be the introduction of AI, and just the ability for product marketers to do more in terms of just, research, creating content, creating their own custom GPTs, building their own agents, and just this whole unlock with AI in the past few years has probably been the biggest shift. And then I would say kind of outside of that, the other thing that's really changed over the years, I've just seen deeper involvement in the actual product strategy from product marketing, kind of getting a little bit more upstream in terms of just product development. So those are kind of the two areas where I've seen some of the biggest changes.
Yeah, AI is the talk of the town. Everybody talks about AI. With that being said, with AI, what do you think has been the demand that product marketers have to do that you didn't see before?
Yeah, I think in product marketing, you're always tasked with becoming an expert, not only in that product, but also then in the industry in and of itself. And a good example was, I previously worked in the education industry, so I had to learn a lot about, higher education trends, what affects enrollment, how are universities funded, what are some of the issues that professors care about, and then switching to HubSpot, having to come in and learn all about, what does the B2B sales industry look like, right? What are sales leaders' top concerns? So you've always had this kind of balance of having to become not only a product expert, but then also an industry and a content expert. And then if, I switch later to, I don't know if I ever become work in dairy farming or some random thing, I'm going to have to become an expert there. And I think AI's kind of made people become the expectations have been raised. You have deep research, you have all of these tools at your fingertips to basically get up to speed even faster. So I think the expectation of just product and field expertise has really risen.
Do you find that to be exciting, or is it more work?
I think it's it's always more work. No, I think it is exciting in that if you're someone who really wants to get up to speed, especially if you're talking to different customers, at HubSpot, we have customers in so many different industries, and just being able to quickly spend, 5-10 minutes before a call, getting up to speed on even just the top 3 or 4 things that they're going to care about in their industry. I think that's been really exciting. I think the challenge is still at the end of the day, you can have AI generate all of this, great research for you. You can have you still have to then go through and actually learn it, read it, ask follow-up questions, and really try and get that level of understanding. So you still have that time element. But overall, I would say I think it's more exciting, especially if you like learning about, new industries and new businesses.
Yeah. Where do you think most marketing, on a whole spectrum of marketing, where do you think product marketing is often being underestimated?
I think it depends by company, right? Mm-hmm. I think it depends on the relationship that you as a product marketer have with your sales team and then also with the product team. There's a lot that's expected out of product marketing in both of those areas, and they're kind of the two totally opposite ends of the spectrum. So I think product marketing sometimes can be underestimated just in terms of the expertise that they can bring from the market, whether that be competitor performance, feedback from the sales team, kind of like what they're hearing in the industry, bringing that to product, and then vice versa, also then bringing that same kind of like, this is actually how the product works, these are the benefits, back to sales and being able to be in a sales call and be like a credible source for the sales team. So I think we'll continue to be just underestimated depending on how companies are structured. I've kind of seen it go both ways. But I think now, even with AI, like storytelling and just being able to really craft like really, really clear narratives and positioning, that's just something that I think most people may underestimate in the world of AI. I mean, we'll have to see.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a lot that product marketing, especially with content and sales enablement, there's a lot that product marketers can do, but not a lot of companies are tapping into that. I guess my next question would be, I've been hearing a lot about full funnel marketing, which is basically what this podcast is all about too. But where do you see that in a day-to-day basis? What does it look like for you as a product marketer?
Yeah, I feel like I've seen people post, they'll say like, oh, I'm a full stack product marketer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel like I know what that means, and sometimes like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. But sounds from like very technical.
It sounds great. But I think from my perspective, like a full funnel product marketer in this case could be someone who can think about like, okay, what's the traditional like toolkit of a product marketer, from like positioning and messaging, like sales enablement, like informing web automation and some of those other teams. You have that lens, but then also I think like from a customer perspective, if you look at the entire customer journey, I think being a full funnel PMM means that you can really like plug in anywhere there, whether you're like working with brand on a campaign or you're going all the way down to working with like, you know, the services team to make sure they have like the right documentation, and being able to pull, like use AI, I think, to actually like plug in your expertise into those different areas. I think that could be where it's going. And I think one of the things that AI has done a really good job of is allowing marketers to be more generalists in some areas. So for example, if I'm, you know, going to work with like, let's say like an SEO or like a CRO team, I can go in and kind of think about like, okay, how do I use AI to kind of, you know, quickly get up to speed on like this domain of marketing that maybe I don't spend as much time in? What are the top trends? How can I, you know, help them with keyword research and all of these other things? And I think AI is helping us become just a bit more generalized, which is probably where I could see the full funnel, kind of like PMM and just general marketing be going.
Are you excited about that? Or do you think that's going to like put more work on someone's day-to-day workload?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see just how roles change over the next, like, probably honestly, like 2 to 3 to 4 years.
Exactly.
There's parts of it that are definitely really exciting. I think there's so much opportunity to bring, you know, the voice of the customer into all of these different marketing areas, but then also just like that level of like product value, the product benefits, bringing that closer to the people who are actually writing that messaging and actually like even, you know, creating those ads or, you know, writing that landing page copy. So I think that in that bit, it's really, really exciting. I think it's going to be challenging to then sort of define like, okay, what is the like core role of a PMM if we're getting pulled in all of these different directions. But overall, it's just something that I think we're just going to have to wait and see how like AI shakes out, honestly, over the next couple of years.
It's a new thing every week. I wouldn't even say month at this point. It's new every week.
It really is. Like the pace is so fast. I feel like I learned something, and then by the next week, what I had already just learned has already been like, it's already old news. So I think even just continuing education, that's such a huge part of the job now, whether that's AI, like product marketing expertise, or just your own, you know, industry and product. That's just something that I think is just increasing more and more.
Do you think that on a day-to-day basis, like the collaboration is just getting more stronger than it used to be, because there's no way you can do something siloed?
Yeah, no, totally. I think being able to collaborate with sales teams, with services, with CS, and just with all of the other marketing functions, I mean, people are kind of like seeking out and always trying these new ideas now, right? That like you're seeing from AI, like different tactics, different new tools. And so they're always kind of looking for people to help. So I think collaboration has definitely I think it's definitely increased.
Yeah. So when it comes to like the whole stage of acquisition, then we have activation, then we have retention, where do you think PMM's influence is actually underused?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one, you know, I've thought about a lot throughout my time in previous roles and then here as well. I would actually say on the retention and the usage side. So much of what we focus on, you know, just in marketing in general, and I think even just broadly at a lot of companies, just getting those new customers, getting that net new revenue. But when you kind of find out that like it's actually kind of hard to keep customers really happy, keep them engaged, keep them up to date on how the product's changing. And now, you don't just have like legacy players and all of these traditional competitors you would have had. You have AI startups and all of these new companies that are spinning up and solving, in some cases, like point solutions. They're doing it really, really well. So retaining customers, I think, is just more important than ever. And I think PMM, because they have that product knowledge and they also have that market, that customer knowledge, they have the opportunity to really influence some of like the retention and the usage plays, whether that's in-app, whether that's with CS, or whether that's even through services. I think there's an opportunity for product marketing to be more involved, and even be kind of like have KPIs and metrics around what that actually looks like when you're talking about measuring success, whether that's retention, less downgrades, less cancellations. I think that's a huge area for PMM to be involved in.
I think like with the whole growth at all costs is dying down, it has been for a while now. Do you think that product marketing has like a much bigger role to play now because of that change?
Yeah, I would say so. I think like even when you have teams that are looking at like building out, what does that, what's the onboarding experience look like? What's the first 60 days, the first 90 days? What's like, if you're doing QBRs with CS, like what does that look like? I think people in those roles are often looking for like, well, what is the product expertise? What's the content? What's the strategy? What should we be telling the customer? And if you're in a position to kind of have that opinion as product marketing is, it just makes, I think it's some, what was I trying to say? It just makes it, I think, like it makes you more available as like the expert to them. And I think they're going to utilize product marketing.
Yeah. So when it comes to like the first thing, let's say we have acquired a customer and then we're trying to convert them, but they're not converting. As a PMM, what is the first thing that you look at?
Yeah, I think it's like there's two areas. Like if we're thinking about like, okay, we're on the marketing side, like obviously you can look and see, where they're dropping off throughout the journey, whether that's, they're getting to a certain piece of content, whether it's, stalling in a certain stage in the deal. You can look at gone calls. You can go that whole route. Or the other thing that's really interesting too, I think, is about actually within the product, like the time to value. So if for example, if you offer trials, you can go in and kind of see like, okay, at what point how long do they spend? What point do they get to? Like how much of the onboarding do they check off? But really like trying to find out how long does it take them from sign up to like that first almost like return on their time, on their investment, and that first like kind of like aha moment, and defining what those are, I think is one of the things that's most important
to look at. Right. So you have a team. I have a question about hiring because you know that I'm in a job hunt phase. So you've managed and hired product marketers. What do you actually look for in candidates right now in this season?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that like I've asked, I feel like I've asked hiring managers when I've been looking for jobs too. Like and the role, it so depends. Like, so the first thing I think about is like, well, what is the role? What's the level? What's the product? What that's going to work on? Like, what's the makeup of the team already? And then also like, what does the business need? Like, where are we going as a company? Kind of trying to put the business first, then the team first, above even the individual role, and thinking about like, what does that right experience, what do those right capabilities look like? That sounds super generic, but genuinely, like, I think that influences what we're actually looking for. The next thing I think just now in terms of product marketing is like someone who has a really, really clear track record of owning or like working on those product launches. And if it's someone who, maybe is trying to get into product marketing, someone who can then like translate different projects, different marketing campaigns or activities. Let's say they worked in like demand gen. They can almost translate that into like tangential like launch experience. So really talking about, how they took ownership of something from like day one, how they had to get buy-in, how they had to write content, and how they had to like manage, differing like opinions and lots of stakeholders. That's always something that we're looking for. And then I think just in general, what I always look for is someone who can ask really, really good questions. Someone who's a self-starter, someone who is independent. They can come in and not only just like bring, their own PMM knowledge, but really also like up level the whole team, not just come from another company and try and do that exact same thing here, but also not just come here and do the exact same thing we're already doing. So someone who's willing to try and like up level the whole team is something we're like always looking for, I feel like. Yeah. And it's tough. This is a really tough time too. Yeah. It's really tough. And I've been in the job market like throughout my career where it's been great. And it was like one of those times where just, I feel like the recruiter DMs were like amazing. And then it's also, there's been times where it's like, this is like, I'm probably not leaving this job for a while. Just thinking back to a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And yeah, it's just one of the things that I think just always is evolving now.
Yeah. Is there like a skill or some instinct that you used to overlook, but now you're like, no, this is something I really need to see in a candidate or even yourself?
There's only so much you can learn from a candidate in like 30 minutes and a quick, and like looking over their resume on LinkedIn. I think just for myself and then for people in general, one of the things I heard here at HubSpot that I thought was really just said really well and like stuck with me is like, growth doesn't always look like this linear progression, right? And one of the things that you can do to make yourself, I think, stand out now at your current company or whether you're looking for a new role, is just like seeking out what are those really challenging problems that exist, even if they're like slightly outside of your role, and like stepping in to try and solve them. So taking on those, not just like stretch projects, but actively working with like, different teams, whether that's sales, CS, or different marketing teams, and kind of trying to figure out, okay, like what are their like biggest challenges? Like what's something that they just, if they could solve, they would, or they just can't solve, and just actively trying to help with something that might not be the most fun. Maybe it's just like really challenging. But seeking out and solving those for the business, I think that's made people stand out. And I just think it's a good way to think about like, career progression as well.
Yeah, basically like having a lot more agency and having that interest go out of their way. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah,
exactly. And I would say the other one I've heard too that was also really good was someone once told me just because there is an opportunity doesn't mean it's the right one. And I think for candidates and then even people like your own company or you're looking at different roles, just because there is an opportunity, it really does not mean like that is necessarily the right one. You don't have to take something just because it's there, or just go for it just because it's there. I think oftentimes the more strategic move is going to be really sitting down and thinking about like the 3, 5, 10 years where you want to go, and the path isn't always going to look like straight to it. You may have to take side steps, change industries, change roles, but that's just something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. Actually, very helpful. And I also know that there's been a lot of hype around product-led growth. It's not just now, it's been there for almost 5 to 6 years at this point. So if, let's say that a product marketer is working on a campaign and if someone signs up, what should they actually look at first? What's the first signal?
Yeah, I think like product-led growth has been one of those things too, where I feel like I've seen PMM roles where it'll just say like PMM product-led growth, like for that's the entire role. So totally agree. Like that's a huge trend. I think the first signal that they should be looking for in terms of like signing up for a campaign is just the overall. I mean, it's tough. It's going to depend on what you're actually trying to do. So I think when I think about previous experience, the first thing we would kind of look at just like what's the like fit of this customer. Like, do they fit our ICP? How well does our product meet their needs? What's the sales cycle going to look like? If it's lower on in the funnel, I mean, in some of my previous roles, we're thinking about like, okay, who are the decision makers? What's the buying process? What's the buying committee? What's their current solution? And kind of actually trying to get to like the sales motion a lot faster. One of the things though that I do see around PLG now is really this evolution. I think from what we had was hyper personalization, where you could expect an experience that it said your name and knew your industry. It may be, it was tailored to you by like a CSM. And I think with AI now, we're really seeing that kind of like go away in areas and just become like full personalization be the expectation. So that wasn't really the answer to your question, but that was just like a PLG kind of like trend that I wanted to say that was just tossing on at the end there.
Well, I guess like even with AI, right? Like we have a lot of these positionings happening. How do we figure out if this is just like a thing we're adding? It's like a word we're adding to our campaigns versus like it's actually going to be helpful rather than just adding an assistant that's not really AI, that's not really trained on any data. How does marketers do we position that?
Yeah, you're thinking about like if I'm at a company and I'm rolling out like an AI feature.
Exactly. Yeah,
I feel like almost now it's like salt on food.
Exactly.
It's like it's expected. But then it's also like you can definitely put too much. Like this does not have salt on it. I can taste it. I think it's tough. Like I've heard someone on LinkedIn the other day said the term agent washing, and I was like, what does this mean? But it's like when you're calling anything like an agent, what may have just been like a workflow with a couple AI like elements in it. Now suddenly this agent. And there are true like AI, agents out there that are like fully autonomous that could do some of the like jobs and functions, which is really cool. But I think to your question about like how do you make sure this is positioned clearly, I think like I like to lead with like the actual utility and the benefit. So obviously, for example, if I'm talking about like HubSpot's Sales Hub product, if we're going to say something about like, okay, well, we have a deal score product that's powered by AI. It looks at the customer's deal, and it'll predict how likely it is to close, scale of 1 to 100. So rather than just kind of going and saying like, oh, this is this AI deal score, it leverages AI to scan like your entire pipeline. You can talk about the fact that, well, this is going to surface deal risks. Managers can use this to prioritize their weekly meetings, their weekly one-on-ones with sales reps. It's going to give you better forecasting because you'll be able to better predict actually how many of these deals are going to close. You can filter by it. So leading with like the utility, the value, because a lot of times, especially if your customers are maybe like small or mid-sized businesses, or, if your customers aren't even super fluent in their tech stack in the first place, trying to just dump a bunch of like, customizable, buildable agents on them isn't going to be what they're looking for. So leading with the actual value, I think is like a basic answer, but one that we've seen work pretty well.
No, yeah, I do think like with when we position a product a certain way, and when they actually use the product, it looks a certain way. And I think that's the mismatch a lot of companies. And I think it falls on product marketers because who asked you to position it like that? Because we don't really offer it. Have you ever seen that happen with other companies or with HubSpot, or any examples?
Where we're positioning something that just doesning match what it
sometimes
does.
It's just like we think they understand it, but they don't actually end up understanding what we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think like I think back to, an example in my previous role. So I worked in education, and it was at a company called Cengage, and they had launched the first subscription for textbooks, for like online ebooks. And it sounds great. You're like, oh, I'll save tons of money. And to us, when we were sitting there thinking about it, we're like, well, this just like it doesn't sell itself, but it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like I'm a student, I have to buy multiple products for 5 classes that I take. I can just buy one thing. It'll be vastly cheaper and totally eliminate the cost of everything. And I think for us, like we led with some of that messaging, and I don't think we fully anticipated just like, well, how does this actually translate into someone's like day-to-day, their actual value? They have classes that wouldn't use Cengage. They would have students that would not buy books at all. And then we were also thinking like, okay, all of these different add-ons would provide a ton of value to them, different partnerships, different offers, that kind of thing. And many people just wanted that much more like simple product experience in an ebook. So I think you can honestly, like you can sit down and be like, this is going to solve like all of everyone's problems. This is going to save them so much money. But until you actually like see that get implemented, I think, yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that answer, really. But you know what I mean? I think it's like in your mind, you may have one value. In our mind, it was like, okay, this is going to save money.
Exactly.
And in the student's mind, it's like, that might have not been the first thing I was set out to do. I wanted to just get like the right materials for my courses. So yeah, that can be the mismatch.
Right. If you had to say like there's this one mistake that all product marketers or marketing leaders are making that they're just misunderstanding, what would that one thing be?
I think this is going to be something that a lot of people would say, but in product marketing, if a lot of what you're focused on is positioning and messaging, and obviously product launches, sometimes it can be hard to like really tie some of those activities back to bottom line metrics. So I think one of the things that not people still get wrong, but that's just harder to do and people don't take the time to do, it's just not tying some of that work directly to business impacts. Even if it's like something you're influencing, I think it's so key to kind of try and tie that work back. So it's not something I think I see a lot, especially here at HubSpot, but just kind of what I've seen throughout my career is for product marketing, sometimes it can be hard to actually tie to those metrics. So just something I think we're always trying to get better on.
Do you think this ties back into like getting a seat at the revenue table and having a bigger voice there?
I think it definitely does. Like anytime you can bring the numbers you're influencing to any conversation, it's automatically credibility in my mind, and I think in the mind of a lot of people. And I also think when you think about like those important meetings, those key places where you want product marketing to have a voice, often we can bring that understanding of the customer, that understanding of the product in a way that other teams can't. And so that plus the metrics, I think, is a way that we've definitely been able to get, into some of those more important meetings and discussions.
Yeah, definitely. I do think it's becoming more of a thing now where FP&A and product marketers are just getting at the same table. We have to speak the same language. and there's just a lot more that we have to prove.
Exactly. Yeah. AI is making it easier, right? I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's great because it's like having a teacher look over your work, but it's not exactly like that, but it's also kind of like that.
It is kind of like that. Yeah. I haven't thought about, yeah, I got, I use my own like style voice that knows how I speak in Claude. And so I'm like, yeah, does it sound like something Alex would say? But totally.
Yeah. So what's the one thing you would say that product marketers, be it entry level or someone who's in mid-career, would have to master in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
I mean, if I say AI again, does that count? I'll say AI and then one other one. I would say like, yeah, really just like taking, kind of like taking a hold of your own like AI knowledge journey, building custom GPTs, creating projects in Claude, leveraging deep research with Gemini, trying out just new AI tools, new AI software. Sometimes it works and you find a ton of value. Sometimes it doesn't, but really making sure you're upskilled there, I think it's going to be huge. And then I think even just like developing like some domain expertise, think about like community marketing or even events, even automation and a few others, like just taking some courses, trying to become a bit of an expert in those fields as well is only going to broaden your kind of like availability, I think, to recruiters and hiring managers. And also it goes back to what we were saying earlier in terms of like a full stack marketer, developing a little bit of that deep domain expertise, I think can go a long way.
I know we talked a little bit about how product marketing should be able to focus a little bit more on retention. I have a question there. How much do you collaborate with customer marketers and how important do you think that is?
Oh, it's so important. At Cengage, like I worked really, really closely with our customer marketing teams who were responsible for customer training, for a lot of the customer support, and working with them, like not just selling the product, working with them to actually get customers to use it, to resolve their complaints and like even bring some of that feedback back to the product team was huge. So I think that can be one of the like tightest partnerships that I think product marketing can have. I see like for product marketing, I see like acquiring net new customers and also like driving usage they're almost equal in my mind in terms of importance now. So I think having that relationship with them, just as you would then have a relationship with, the marketing teams you would work with to launch a product is key.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one outdated PMM habit or mindset that you could kill, what would that be?
Ooh, kill something. I would say, I feel like one size fits all messaging is a little tough now. Just like the very, very generic kind of like super high level, like what my company, what my brand does tagline that's really aspirational. I think that can just be challenging in the way that people expect personalization now and the way that a lot of people are finding products through like LLMs and having that kind of recommend to them that very like beautiful, like, 5 to 10 word kind of like what we do. I would say that one might be something that eventually might be on the way out.
Yeah, no, for sure. What's the one bold take that you have about product marketing? Something you can predict about product marketing over the next decade?
Wow. Well, if I had a crystal ball, I would be playing the lottery. But if I had to predict what would happen to product marketing in the next decade, I think there'll be a big importance placed on product marketing. I think AI is going to really allow marketers, sales, CS, and other people to become generalists and like also expertise in a lot more of their field and their domains than they previously had before. So I think that's going to allow product marketing to have an even bigger seat at the table. And I could see product marketing getting really, really involved with like the product build process, like working alongside product designers, engineers, product leadership too, maybe even like sitting in product occasionally in some companies. And I could even see product marketing also having a bigger role on the sales side of things, like working more with sales specialists and sales engineers in those late stages of deals. So yeah, I feel pretty good about product marketing, especially in terms of AI.
Do you think it's going to become the center of attention and of collaboration? Like we're going to talk to everybody in the company because we have to.
Ooh, that would be nice. I think it could. I think it could be. I think wherever you go, you can kind of see like, is this a sales-led company? Is this a product-led company? And then sometimes even like, is this a marketing-led company?
Right.
But I think depending on like how it's set up, I could see it being one of those like key strategic roles where almost everyone has some sort of relationship with product marketing. Hard to do at a massive company.
Right.
But yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had for you. Is there something you wanted to say that I didn't ask you?
No, I feel like if I said AI again, like that's going to come on, like, that'll be like time number 10 or
We're just
11.
going to pause and say, okay, goodbye.
People are like, we don't need to hear this anymore. No, I think this has been super great to talk to you. I'm really excited about the future of product marketing. I think it's a really interesting field to be in, and I think the opportunity to upskill and learn about product marketing, even prior to being a PMM, just with AI, is easier and just more accessible than ever before, which I think is one of the coolest things that we can do in terms of education in general. So, thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. It was so helpful. I'm just so excited about product marketing. I've always been
perfect. I try to instill hype in people, so I'm glad that came through late Monday afternoon in a really, really hot June day.
Hot, yes. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.